Hi everyone, you're warmly welcome to the SMS by Dressing's channel, your fashion faculty for acquiring dressmaking skills. Well, if you're just bumping into me for the very first time, you know how we do it. Click on the notification button and click on the subscription button so you get alerts when new videos are uploaded. So straight up, we are getting to business. This video or this tutorial is on the basic bodice block. This basic bodice block is devoid of any style whatsoever. However, it is the basis on which all other dressy, intricate styles will be adapted. And so a firm grasp on how to draft and cut it out is an advantage for more advanced projects, so to speak. So before we start, the two things I want you to keenly take note of: the difference in the across chest and across back measurements. If the figure is full, you usually have the back broader than the front, and so there'll be a slight difference in the across chest and across back measurements. When the outfit is all cut out, a few adjustments will have to be made. Also, you have a difference in the front nape to waist measurement and then the back nape to waist measurement. Now, because the measurement taken for the front nape to waist starts from the highest point of the nape, goes over the bust, under the bust, and then to the natural waistline. It makes the measurements a bit bigger or longer. The stretch from the nape to the natural waistline becomes longer than the back nape to waist. So again, you'd usually have a front nape to waist measurement like 18 or 19, and the back would be 15. The back nape to waist measurements will be 15. And so again, when the outfits are cut out, a few adjustments will have to be made. I dealt with that in the tutorial, so you can also do the same if you're working with measurements that belong to a full figure. Now I'm posting the measurements I'm going to be using in the description box, and so you can have a very firm idea of how to go about it. So that's it. It's nothing complicated, or it's not rocket science. It's as easy as ABC. So let's get started. So you're welcome. This is what a basic bodice block would be looking like when it's all drafted and done with. You have all your constructional lines in position. The center line, the folded edge, will always be a center line. Then would have a neckline, a shoulder line, a cross chest, bust, waist, and hip lines in position. Then we'll curve in a neckline, shoulder, armhole, bust points, waist points, and then hip points for us to be through with the bodice block. So this is where all styles will be adapted from. Once you have an understanding of this, it will be easy for you to draft all other styles. Let's get going. Like I said, we have a center line and a folded from the center line quarter hip measurement plus 2 extra inches allowance. First line to rule is your neckline. Then an inch downwards should bring you to your shoulder line. You square across. Then you move down 4 inches from the shoulder line to your across back line. And then you also mark that out 4 inches down from the shoulder line. From the across back line, you go down again 4 inches down to locate your bust line. You mark it out and then square out. From the bust line, we are moving to the waistline. For the waistline, you're using your shoulder to waist measurement to locate your waistline. And I am using 16. I'm using my nape to waist measurement to locate my waistline. Then my hip line, I'm using my top length to locate my hip line, which is 24. I mark that out, and then we can start incorporating the measurements in. The first thing, that's your hip line, your waist, your bust, across chest, shoulder, and then neckline. So for the neckline, I'm using 3 inches by 1, 3 inches across by 1, dropping down to shape out a high neckline for the back. Then I'll slant down 5 inches from the neckline down to the shoulder to locate my shoulder points. So I connect the shoulder points to the neck point. Then I move to the across back line, and then I use my half across back measurement, divide the across back measurement into 2, and then mark half on that point. On the bust line, you also measure your quarter bust measurements and then mark it out. When you are done, you're going to be connecting all the 3 points, shoulder, across back, and then bust points. You're going to connect it with a curve to create your armhole. You can use the French curves, or you can practice curving the armhole. So curve it beautifully and then connect the cross chest point to the shoulder, and you'll be done with the armhole. So that's your armhole, you have it there. We are moving onto the waistline now, and you're going to be using your quarter waist plus 1 inch extra allowance for locating your waist point. So your quarter waist measurement plus 1 inch, and then on your hip line, your quarter hip measurement. You're going to connect all the 3 points, the bust point to the waist with a straight line, and then from the waist down to the hip with a slight curve, and we'll be done with the side seams, and then we can move on to the darts, locating the darts. So that's the side seam being drafted in, and that's your hip, waist, bust, across chest, and other lines. So we are now working on the darts. Use your half dart interval. The dart interval is the distance from one nipple to the other nipple. So use half of that to locate your dart interval. I'm using 4.5. Mark it down. Now the length of the dart is 10. So I'm splitting 5 inches downwards from the waistline and 5 inches upwards from the waistline. When I'm done, I'm going to split out half an inch on both sides of the line to get the shape of the dart. So half an inch outward, half an inch inward, and then I'm going to connect all the outer points to the straight line, and that will get the shape of the dart into the garments that I have drafted. So that's it. We have our darts in position. So this is what we have now. Once this is done, I'm going to place it onto the other piece, also folded quarter hip plus 2 inches stitching allowance, to cut out my front. So I'm leaving 1.5 inches extra allowance in front for opening. Since I didn't leave any opening at the back, we'll have it in the front. So I've left the allowance for opening, and I'm basically going to pin up and cut out both pieces together. Since all the measurement is on the back, I don't have to do anything. Off camera, I added 2 inches side seam on the sides, and then half an inch for the armhole, 1 inch for the shoulder. Those are the allowances I left. 1 inch for the shoulder, half an inch for the armhole, 2 inches for the side seams, and half an inch for the hem. So I'm cutting out now on my extra lines that I created for the seam allowance. So that's it. That's my 2 inch seam allowance at the side, and then I'll cut out my half inch at the hem, and I'll be done. So neckline, armhole gone, side seam also dealt with. I'm now working, cutting out the hem. So that's it. I'm done with the hem. So once that is done, I need to locate my shoulder to waist measurement or nape to waist measurement separately on the front. The front is 17 and the back was 16. So I've remeasured again and marked 1 inch downwards on the front as 17, and then I'm indicating a new waistline for the front. It's very important to make those changes before you start stitching. I'm now notching my back waistline and then notching my new waistline. So once I see the notch position, I know that is where my waistline is. So that's it for both front and back. I'll take the back off and now try and recreate my desired neckline on the front. Once the back is off, I have the front and I intend to create a square neckline for the front. Now I'm going to use a location that is in between my across chest and bust line. Once you know where your bust line runs, you don't want to get your square too close to the bust, else you'll be exposing your breast. So my square should be anything an inch beyond my across chest line will be fine for my square. It's normally advisable to cut a shallow neckline, open it. If it's not deep enough, then you can deepen it, rather than just cutting deep into it and realizing you've gone too far. So an inch below the across chest line, I square across to get my square neckline. So that's it. I'm going to cut it out now and then open it up, and that will be it. It wasn't too difficult, was it? So this is the block from which all other styles will be adapted. Please experiment with various necklines and see what you can come up with. Now for the front armhole, I'm going to deepen it a bit because my across chest for the front is a bit smaller than the back. The back is 15, the front is 14. So I've gone in and then reduced the across chest measurements a bit to fit the front. So those changes must be made on the cutout piece before sewing. So I've reduced my across chest. So that's it. You can see that the across chest is a little deeper than the across back to fit the specific measurements. So I'm notching my darts now, and that will be it. Hope you enjoyed it. Thank you. Bye.